Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia, and we're here today breaking down some early rankings. It is me, it is Tags, and it's a special guest from NFL Network. Our own good buddy, Michael Florio, is joining us today. And what we're going to do is break down, again, the very, very early, way too early, Tags is so uncomfortable even talking about this show, rankings, and it's going to be a good time. We're going to talk about wide receiver 1s, 2s, and 3s, where we have some variance between our early rankings before the draft. Did I mention they're early? Tags, I hope you take a deep breath. And also, we're going to do a little tight end talk as well. Some guys that maybe some of us have as tight ends 1, some that we don't right now, and where maybe Kyle Pitts and some other guys might fall depending on the draft. And Tags, I know this is, I think you've mentioned it once, maybe twice before the show to me that this is very early. This is too early. I can't do this. It's very early, but this is fun. Let's have a little fun. I know the draft is just days away, but look, let's just tell everybody right now that we're going to hold you to these rankings you give us today for the rest of the season, right? I think that's only fair.
I mean, you could judge me on them. I mean, I guess that's the thing. It's my job, right? So, but it's more about doing rankings without a full picture, right? Because there's a lot of big name players that are going to be drafted in the first round that are going to affect a lot of these rankings. So basically, I'm going to hedge some of my bets, and you better be prepared for it. That's all.
Oh, hedging your bets. Boy, we're set up for success already. And Michael Florio, a good friend of mine for many years, who I've done many shows with, and you can see him all the time, obviously, on NFL Fantasy over there on the NFL Network. He does writing for them. He works at SiriusXM Radio for Rollerballer. He's all over the place. And Florio, it's great to talk to you. I got two of my favorite mics here, and this is great. And, seeing how much you've done over the last few years and how far you've come here and to have the guts to move 3,000 miles away from everything and do what you did and pick up everything on a, hey, I can make this work kind of thing and carve out the niche you have over there. I am so proud every single time I turn on a TV and I see you and your glorious beard on NFL Network. It makes me so happy, man. And just congratulations to you. You're doing such a great job over there. And I just want you to know how much I care and admire and still love you, baby.
Well, thank you, Joe. I still love you too, and you're going to make me blush or tear up. I don't know, but you're going to make me emotional.
We should get some color in your face. You're very pale today.
I am. It's very cloudy in LA right now, so I haven't really been able to get that tan yet. But yeah, I'm super excited to be on the show with you guys. If it's half as much fun as we had joking around before the show, it is going to be an amazing show.
We're setting the standards. We got three Italians talking about wide receivers.
To be fair, Joe said his two favorite mics. He was talking about his microphone and Mike Florio. He's not.
Oh yeah. Tags, you are a distant third in this pecking order. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, that's right. Got the three mics here. It's going to be great, and we're going to talk a little wide receivers, little tight ends. We'll see how the day goes. I love it. I love when three Italians get together to talk football. It's going to be a good time. So let's start here with our guests because, obviously we're going to get to Florio's rankings first and we'll go through wide receiver 1. But before we go through anything, I just want to remind everybody we have that NFL draft live stream coming up in just days. This is the perfect second screen experience for you as you're watching the NFL draft. You should have us on your iPad or your PC or whatever you got going on. If you got the 12 TVs like Tags has, you should have us up on one of them because on the YouTube channel for Fantasy Pros, Tags, Yates, and me, Joey P, taking you through the NFL draft, breaking it down fantasy-wise. It's going to be a good time. Plus, don't forget, on Monday next week, on the 26th, we're doing another mock draft. This is only 2 rounds. If you missed the 3-round draft, go back and listen on demand. Go back and watch on demand. It was fantastic. Only 90 minutes, 3 rounds. Take that, NFL. It takes you like a week to do 3 rounds. We could do it in 90 minutes. It's amazing how quick we are, especially Tags. He was ready with that pick in his hand every single time. It was awesome. And I want to make sure everybody knows that on the 26th on Monday, we got another 2-round mock draft coming right at you. So let's kick things off and talk a little football here. So Florio, take us through your wide receiver 1s. Just give us the names 1 through 12, and then we'll go on to Tags and then me, and we'll start to break it all down.
Yeah, so my top 12 wide receivers right now are Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, then Stephon Diggs, DeAndre Hopkins. That's my elite tier right there. And then after that, I have A.J. Brown, Calvin Ridley, Keenan Allen, who I am super high on heading into this season, Justin Jefferson, DK Metcalf, Michael Thomas, who a year ago would have seemed criminal to have ranked at 10, Allen Robinson, Terry McLaurin, and then Allen Robinson at 12 to round out the top 12.
Great to see McLaurin getting some love. I feel like he's going to get a lot of love on this show today. And obviously, Calvin Ridley is a very, very beloved wide receiver here between Tags and myself. We were driving that train very hard last year, and luckily it all worked out. And it is fascinating to see where Michael Thomas is and where Tags has him on his rankings too. So Tags, give us your wide receiver ones right now, very, very early to hold you to it rankings.
Well, I think Florio forgot there was still the best player in the game that's still playing out of his rankings, so we'll get to him. Number 1 is Davante Adams. Number 2 is Tyreek Hill. 3, DeAndre Hopkins. 4, Stephon Diggs. 5, A.J. Brown. And I think I'm going to put A.J. Brown in that elite tier. I think I would actually stick him with those other 4. Like, I'm having a tough time between Hopkins, Diggs, and Brown because Brown is going to see those elite targets this year. There's no choice. Even if they throw the ball 450 times, he's going to get... I'll call it a 30% target share with the talent they have on that roster and where they're actually picking in the draft because they're not going to be able to trade up. They have too many holes in that roster. And then DK Metcalf at 6, Calvin Ridley at 7, Justin Jefferson at 8, Michael Thomas at 9, Keenan Allen at 10, Julio Jones at 11 because he is still playing football. And at 12, I have Allen Robinson. So honestly, the only difference we have is that you have Terry McLaurin in there. I have Julio Jones. Again, Julio... He's the man. I mean, I can't disrespect Julio. I feel like I have him too low, to be fair, but it's like these other guys. It's like with Calvin Ridley ascending and them potentially drafting a tight end there in the first round. Potentially, I'm putting a big potential there. But I think that there are some limiting factors for Julio's ceiling this year, while those other guys have a chance to be, top 3.
Well, you're not going to like my rankings because Julio just missed it. Now, look, maybe this offseason he could work his way back into my good graces. But look, for me, it's Davante Adams and Tyreek Hill, then Hopkins, Stephon Diggs, Calvin Ridley. That's kind of my upper tier. Then I got DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown right there. Now, A.J. Brown probably going to move up. I just want to see what else Tennessee does during the draft and what kind of pieces they move into. And if they can bring in some other pieces around there, then I really like it. Because as great as A.J. Brown is, I feel like it's really easy right now for everybody to key in on him. And in terms of talent, I could not agree more with Tags. Like, he is upper tier talent. I just want to see what else they do, because right now I think there's some vacancies right now at the motel, and I just want the Tennessee Titans to fill some of them. Jefferson for me next, then Robinson, Keenan Allen, Michael Thomas at 11, so we're all kind of in a weird place with Thomas. And then 12 for me is Godwin, and this might be a little bit of a leap of faith. I just think that Godwin fits so well with what I think Tom Brady wants to do, and we saw the two of them when they were all healthy on the field together at the end look really good. And Julio could very well, flip-flop in that spot. So let's talk about Julio. Florio, you don't have Julio in he just missed. He's number 13 for me. You have him right outside the 12. Why not Julio as the top wide receiver 1 grouping for you?
Well, part of it is because he's getting a little bit up there in age, and I always factor that in with the because for me, I don't have to worry about anything like that with like Terry McLaurin, but with Julio, maybe we're starting to get to the end of the road. Maybe the injuries last year are a precursor of things to come. Plus, I think we're starting to, it might not happen in 2021, but it very well might. I think we're starting to see a transition like we did like 10 years ago with Atlanta when they went from Roddy White to Julio Jones. I think now the clear path is Julio Jones to Calvin Ridley. And I think Calvin Ridley is a wide receiver 1. I have him in my top 6 or 7, I believe I just said. So yeah. I really like him. I think he is going to see a lot of targets. And I think it could be one of those things that when they're both on the field, they kind of are taken away a little bit from each other. And then when one is absent, they just absolutely explode. It would not surprise me at all if Julio Jones is top 10, even top 5. But I think for the first time ever, he has a couple of awards that he generally never has.
And look, the age is a real factor. You make a great point, too, and kind of bringing us in the Wayback Machine there. Tags, is this potentially history repeating itself in Atlanta, as Florio is kind of alluding to, where you have that one opportunity of, the torch was passed many years ago, and maybe, just maybe, we're seeing that torch be passed again?
Well, Julio Jones was an interesting case, though, because Julio, arguably top 3 wide receiver all time. Like, Julio Jones is legit, where he's a better receiver than Roddy White ever was. Where Calvin Ridley, I don't think will ever surpass Julio. And there's not a bigger Calvin Ridley fan than me. I've been driving that train ever since Alabama. So I love him. I do think they're going to cancel each other out a bit, which is why I'm kind of hedging on both of them. I have Ridley at 7. I have Julio at 11. And if he didn't have a little bit of health scare that like typically almost every year, and it seems like Julio's been hobbled a lot. He's been playing through injuries, but even putting him at 11, I feel like that's built in. the age thing is built in with him. Last year, he averaged more yards per game than I think it was the second highest total of his career. So Julio Jones was performing when he was in the field. It's just the injuries started to add up. You look at that defense, it's still going to allow a ton of points. I mean, Arthur Smith coming over, will the offense get more efficient? Do we see pass attempts come down? There are some risks with Julio Jones, and if there wasn't, I would have him, at wide receiver 6 right now. I would put him ahead of DK Metcalf and Calvin Ridley, but knowing that we have those question marks about him, knowing you have to build in some of that risk, I'll move him down to 11, but I think that's his floor. I can't put him below guys like Allen Robinson and Terry McLaurin, who are in less than ideal scenarios. We don't know what's going to happen with Terry McLaurin, with Curtis Samuel now coming to the offense. Do they add another offensive weapon, because apparently they were looking for another receiver? Ryan Fitzpatrick, how does he fit in with this offense? Do they move to a rookie midseason? Allen Robinson, obviously, the quarterback issues are real. Holdout issue potentially real. I don't know. There's so many questions around those guys that it's like, Julio has questions, but let's not forget he's still Julio Jones.
Oh, and I agree. And I'll put it this way. If you are at the bottom, and just for clarification too, these are half-point PPR rankings, everybody, because we like to make everybody miserable. So we're going to go right in the middle with the half-point PPR, so nobody's happy. But again, that gives you kind of the best sense of where all the value is. But if you were at the bottom, and let's say you doubled up on wide receiver, and Julio Jones was one of those two, and you decide to go double wides at the bottom, I mean, that's about as good as it gets, right? I mean, to have Julio be as a 1A or along with somebody else, like if you took Justin Jefferson and Julio, or A.J. Brown and Julio, what a great start to a team potentially that is, and I'm fine with that. It's just that standalone one where I don't know when you're drafting your 2, I start to worry because of the age and because of the injuries, but you make great points. And Tags, I've been somebody who's defended Julio in the past when people have dropped him in rankings, and I'm saying to myself, are we not seeing these totals that Julio puts up every single year? Guys, what do you think about Michael Thomas here? Because all of us have him still as a wide receiver 1, but I feel like all of us are holding our breath. Florio, how long have you been holding your breath, and do you think it's going to be a moment where you exhale and feel good about the Michael Thomas ranking as a wide receiver 1?
No, I think there's I think there's more risk with Michael Thomas this year than ever. Obviously, the loss of Drew Brees is going to hurt. Like, Drew Brees would just lock in on Michael Thomas running those slant routes. And I know we like to say, oh, slant boy or whatever you want to call him. Michael Thomas is a great wide receiver. Let's just, call a spade a spade. But I don't know if, it would depend a lot for me of which one of those 2 quarterbacks is getting the starting gig there in New Orleans. Because I think, surprisingly, he's a better fit for Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill is a more accurate passer. You look at his adjusted completion percentage throughout there. It's a very small sample size, but it is higher than Jameis Winston. And Winston has always been more of a downfield thrower. Like, his air yards per throw is way higher than Breeze or Taysom Hill. And that is not Michael Thomas' strong suit. He did it when he first came into the NFL. He hasn't been asked to do it in years. He's not a speedster. He's not someone that I want to trust to rely on the deep ball. And maybe Jameis could get better with the LASIK, but he is not the most accurate quarterback. And that's what kind of Michael Thomas relies on. He relies on accuracy and timing with the quarterback. So I think Taysom Hill would be a better fit there. And I think that's kind of an unpopular opinion, because I am someone who is a big Jameis Winston fan and wants to see this Saints offense with him. I just think it would hurt Michael Thomas a little bit more than if it was Taysom Hill and he just locked in and became like the Drew Brees 2.0, just peppering Michael Thomas with targets every time.
Tags, do you think that evaluation is fair, considering, that Bruce Arians offense is so aggressive, and that was what was tasked of Winston, that you must throw the ball deep, we always want to be aggressive, and therefore that's the quarterback he is. Is that the quarterback Winston is, in your opinion, or do you think that there's another version of him that maybe does have a little bit more accuracy, maybe can dial things back and, kind of be more like a Drew Brees-esque sort of a quarterback? Again, sacrilege, I'm not trying to compare the two, but in terms of style, where maybe you dial Winston back and maybe build his confidence that way too, because when we go downfield, eventually there are mistakes, and eventually it was the mistakes that were his undoing.
No, I believe that, Sean Payton's a smart guy, and I think he understands how to run his offense, how to build around players' strengths and weaknesses, and he's done that with Drew Brees. He's dedicated that offense. He's built it around Drew Brees. He's and where he succeeds as the years have gone on. You've seen that the average depth of throw coming down further and further. You've seen Alvin Kamara becoming more and more involved, and that's something like where Taysom Hill comes in. the pass attempts are going to be down. And that's the concern for me, where Michael Thomas would be a safe player, but he is not going to come with any sort of upside. I feel like he's a guy that it'd be rare to see a 100-yard game out of him, which, again, when you're drafting a wide receiver as a top 10 player, it's really difficult to draft him if you know that he's not going to reach that plateau quite a bit. Jameis Winston's a different kind of breed. Jameis Winston cannot be a safe quarterback. He doesn't understand the word safe. He doesn't check down to his running backs. He wants to push the ball down the field. And the thing is like Michael Thomas has been known as slant boy because of Drew Brees. Because Drew Brees' strengths where he's accurate. With Jameis Winston, he can throw the ball down the field with some sort of accuracy, but he's more willing to let his wide receivers win one-on-one situations. Where it's Michael Thomas, you're going to start to see him vary in routes a little bit more. And I know Michael Thomas posted on Instagram recently. He posted a picture of him, flexing in the mirror, and he got a little bit bigger, and he's talking about doing different things. I don't know why he needs to get bigger. I think Michael Thomas is a perfectly fine wide receiver before then. And, talking about Michael Thomas and how last year and Julio Jones and, I just started looking at my rankings and I'm like, why do I have Michael Thomas over Julio Jones?
I was just going to ask you the same question, Tex. I was going to say, who do you feel better about? Do you feel, and you know what, as we're having this conversation, and maybe this is the whole point of today. Maybe today is about us kind of hashing it out and saying, okay, I think this, and then we all get in a room and we think about it. And this is why the expert consensus rankings is so important over on Fantasy Pros. And you can go see the expert consensus rankings, but and that's over there, fantasypros.com. You go to the rankings and you can see where everybody has everyone. But that's kind of where I was going next, which is, for everything we just discussed, it's funny, the more we talk about it, the more I feel like Julio, despite some of those concerns I have about age and Florio has about some of the injuries, is he a safer investment than Thomas, the way we're talking about him?
He might be, actually. When you think about it, you say Julio went through some injuries last year, but so did Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas played 2 fewer games than Julio Jones. He played 7 games. Julio played 9. Julio Jones scored double the fantasy points that Michael Thomas did last year. Double. Like 63 to 120, something like that. So it wasn't even all that close between those guys, and that's just 2 games worth. So Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley might actually be a beneficiary, actually benefit Julio Jones, because Julio Jones is known, he's a guy that's a shadow. It's like, if there's anybody you're going to shadow, it was always Julio Jones. Calvin Ridley has forced teams to be honest and say, hey, you guys are probably going to have to play sides because you're going to have to choose one or the other. I remember the Saints game. If you go back to the Saints, it was last year or the year before, where they had Marshawn Lattimore shadowing Julio Jones, and Calvin Ridley was burning them nonstop, could not stop them. And then, legitimately, midway through the third quarter, they shifted over and they put Lattimore on Ridley. The next play, Julio Jones is like a 54-yard gain. It was kind of ridiculous. And that's why you draft a duo like that. And that's why when we start talking about the Bengals, and it's like, well, they have T. Higgins. Why would they draft Jamar Chase? You put those two together, it's like, what do you do? In today's NFL, those options do pay off. Michael Thomas, we're more concerned about scoring opportunities when they get down to the goal line, because they're gonna run the ball a lot more on the goal line. Because Drew Brees did not turn the ball over. Jameis Winston does. Taysom Hill runs the ball a lot more. So we're going to worry about touchdown upside for Michael Thomas. We're going to worry about pass attempts if it's Taysom Hill. If it's Jameis, I actually feel better about Michael Thomas because I think the pass attempts will be up because Jameis doesn't run the ball. So I would like Michael Thomas more with Jameis. I'm just worried that we're not going to find out until legit a week before the season starts. That's what I'm really worried about. And that Taysom Hill is going to be involved in even more packages than he was with Drew Brees. So I think I'm talking myself into Julio Jones over Michael Thomas.
I think we're all talking ourselves into that. I mean, Florio, go ahead, step in.
I think that I'm not ruling out the fact that we could see a QB tandem. Yeah. And it sounds wild, but if any head coach was to do it, I have no doubts that it would be Sean Payton. He knows what these two can bring, and I'm not even talking about something like a drive for each or something like that. I'm talking Jameis with situational, all right, you're trailing, you have Winston in, you're playing with a lead, you have Hill in. You get near the goal line, you bring Hill in because, that's what they've been doing for years. So I'm very worried about that. I will say I think Julio Jones has a much higher ceiling. I think the floor I would lean a little bit towards Michael Thomas, but I've done a lot of early best ball drafts. I have no Michael Thomas because he goes in the second round still, and I'm taking running backs or tight ends there. I have a lot of Julio Jones because you get him in the third or fourth round in some drafts, and to me, that is a value.
That is sacrilege.
I just pulled it up, Joe. Michael Thomas is going as the 24th player in expert consensus rankings, 24th, end of the second round. Julio Jones is going 34. So you're talking about end of the third round, beginning of fourth. So that's a no-brainer in terms of the value you're getting with those two.
I can tell you right now, all of a sudden, you and I are going to have a whole lot of Julio Jones if that trend continues. By the way, too, another disturbing thing, by the way, thinking about about the Saints. Did you guys see they're making a movie there where Sean Payton's going to be played by Kevin James? Is that not the strangest bit of casting you've ever seen in your whole life?
No.
Yes. True. Go Google it. I just saw it last week. True story. Happy Madison Productions.
I saw that they're making it, but why?
I don't know. I don't know, and I don't understand. I'm going to let everybody just kind of marinate on that for a moment before we go to wide receiver 2s and 3s. Before we do, I want to take a quick minute to welcome in a new sponsor of the show, IP Vanish. So what is IP Vanish? IP Vanish is a virtual private network, a VPN for short, and a VPN is a super important tool that helps you safely browse the internet. You can use a VPN on your computers, your tablets, your phones, even things like a Fire Stick when you're streaming media. And when you use a VPN, all your data is encrypted. What you're reading, what you're searching, what you're watching, where Julio Jones is in the rankings, all of that. Whatever it is you're doing, it's protected. And that's what's so important. And that's why we're telling you about this, because the internet right now is, can be a very dangerous place. And it's no one else's business but yours. So IP Vanish helps you remain anonymous and secure on the internet. For listeners of the show, IP Vanish is offering an incredible 65% off. That's just $3.49 for the first month, or $31.49 for the year. Okay, here's everything you get with IP Vanish. You get anonymous IP addresses. This means your personal IP address can't be tracked by anyone on the web. Circumvent any online censorship. IP Vanish has more than 1,500 servers in 70-plus locations. Get protection when using public Wi-Fi. Remember, IP Vanish, all of your data is encrypted there, so no one can snoop on what you're doing, and 24/7 tech support. Email them, chat with them, you can even call them, and they're there to help. So what you do is you go to ipvanish.com/pros. Again, that's ipvanish.com/pros. Claim your 65% savings, and they have plans to start at just $3.49 a month, or $31.49 for the entire year. And this is the time to sign up with that discount. Again, that's ipvanish.com/pros. And they're even rated 4.7 out of 5 in terms of the customer satisfaction there. So that's over 6,000 reviews. Again, ipvanish.com/pros, 65% off for you today. All right, let's get to wide receiver 2s. Tags, why don't you take us through your 2s, and then we'll go with Florio's 2s and mine.
All right, it's Terry McLaurin right there at the top. DJ Moore at 14, T. Higgins at 15, Mike Evans 16, Odell Beckham 17, Robert Woods 18, Deontay Johnson, Amari Cooper at 20, 21 Chris Godwin, 22 Kenny Galladay, 23 Cooper Kupp, and 24 Adam Thielen.
All right, Florio, let's hear your list.
13 is CeeDee Lamb for me, 14 is Julio, 15 is Godwin, 16 Robert Woods, 17 Higgins, but I think I'm going to flip-flop those two. 18, I know this seems low, Mike Evans, 19 Amari Cooper, 20 DJ Moore, 21 Kenny Galladay, 22 Deontay Johnson, 23 Cooper Kupp, and 24 Brandon Ayuk.
I don't think it's too low for Mike Evans. We'll talk about that in a second there, Florio. Don't get bullied by Tags' rankings on things. And you'll hear a lot of these same names, obviously, just different orders for the most part. For me personally, I've got Julio at 13, then Amari Cooper 14, McLaurin at 15, Woods at 16, CeeDee Lamb at 17. Very excited about Lamb this year. Kenny Galladay at 18, Thielen 19, Deontay Johnson at 20, T. Higgins at 21, Ayuk at 22, Schuster at 23, and Evans at 24. So I've got Evans really low. So let's talk about some of the variants, because Godwin I had as a low-end one. I know you guys have him in different spots, and Evans seems to be another polarizing one. I always like to get out a year early on guys. I see the chronic hamstring issues for Evans the last couple of years. It brings me concern. There's also a lot of options there in this offense, and I understand that Evans had some great moments, especially in the red zone, caught a bunch of touchdowns, and yeah, in half PPR, you could take that into account. However, Godwin did miss a lot of time. If he's back on the field, I kind of wonder how that all shakes out, and I'm concerned because, once again, Evans has been a pillar of stability for a very long time. Eventually, that runs out, and I think right now, when you look at the rest of this field, there's variance there where some other guys can really come on strong. So, Florio, let's get to your thoughts on Godwin and Evans, because these two Tampa wide receivers clearly do have some difference of opinion among the three of us.
Yeah, the Bucs offense might be the best offense ever that I really don't want any part of for fantasy. There's just there's so many mouths to feed there. Like, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and we saw Mike Evans' numbers take a hit when Chris Godwin was on the field.
Right.
And early in the year last year, me and Marcus Grant would always joke on our podcast that Mike Evans was the Jordan Howard of wide receivers because he wasn't putting up big yardage, but every time they got near the goal line, they just threw the ball to Mike Evans. He actually last year had a career low in targets, in yards per game.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't nearly as good, I think, as the the final end of years numbers show just because the touchdown numbers inflated him. But I cannot rely on those touchdowns again, especially since it was the second most touchdowns that Tom Brady has ever thrown in his career. That to me seems unlikely to happen again, even in a good offense like this. Plus, Tom Brady's 44 years old, right? Like, at some point, the wheels have to fall off. We keep saying that.
You know what? I remember saying that 2 years ago, and then 4 years ago, and then 6 years ago, and there he is still winning Super Bowls. But you're not wrong, Florio. You're not wrong. You know, the touchdown, the amount of touchdown total points that go into his point total for last year is the thing that I keep coming back to, Florio. And I'm glad you brought it up because, you know, once again, you'd see a lot of these games where he did have the 1 or 2 big Mike Evans games, but for the most part, it was a lot of, 4 catches for 33, but he would have 2 touchdowns or something like that. And you go, oh, it's a huge day for Evans. But Tags, when you are looking at the game log of Mike Evans, do you see some of these issues that we're seeing where it at least raises a bit of a red flag for you?
Well, you mentioned with Godwin on the field, I don't want to say it's cause and effect. What I saw last year while watching the Bucs, I saw Mike Evans grow as a player, as a person. Like, legitimately, the guy always played with, like, this chip on his shoulder. He had so much emotion while playing the game, and then, like, he matured at some point. And I think it's fair. Brady. Like, Tom Brady he's just brought a difference to that locker room, obviously. And Mike Evans became bigger and bigger. And I saw there was a game where Lattimore was trying to get in his head, and Mike Evans just basically said, whatever, dude, like, I'm just going to play ball. And he balled out. Mike Evans grew as a player, and he grew with Tom Brady. And you saw the trust getting there as the year went on. And that's why Mike Evans, I'm going to stick him higher than Chris Godwin. Godwin's a fantastic football player. He's more versatile than Mike Evans is, but he's not the guy that they're going to go to in the red zone all the time. You're also going to have Rob Gronkowski's returning. You're going to get O.J. Howard back. He's probably going to be eased along coming back from an Achilles, but I'm expecting Antonio Brown to come back too. So it's like Antonio Brown's more of a guy. It was weird last year. They weren't involving Antonio Brown in the slot where they were rotating Mike Evans. They were rotating Chris Godwin. And that's something that Evans really hadn't done earlier in his career. So I like the fact that they tried moving him around, creating some mismatches. I think with Mike, though, I think that I'm going to try and avoid them because I can make the argument that Chris Godwin just didn't have a chance to grow that chemistry with Tom Brady that Mike Evans did. That Chris Godwin is probably better with a 44-year-old Tom Brady as his arm slowly declines. I can make that argument, but then I can make the argument that we saw Mike Evans continue to get better and better with Tom Brady. And we can make the argument that Antonio Brown is like a full offseason learning this offense and getting in there. It's just, it might be maddening week in, week out. It might be better for like a best ball thing than have as your wide receiver 2 in fantasy, which is where we have them both ranked.
Now, every year in the Fantasy Black Book, we've done a very good job of identifying the guys who are going to jump from wide receiver 2s to wide receiver 1s, potentially. Last couple of years, we had a great job. In fact, Mike Florio is going to be doing those wide receiver profiles for the Black Book this year. And we've kind of earmarked, I know I have, and we've kind of had some preliminary discussions about this, Florio, where we talked about T. Higgins and CeeDee Lamb being 2 of those potential guys. I'm waiting to move T. Higgins up my ranks just to make sure that they get past that Jamar Chase temptation early on in the draft, because it is real. It's there. So once that hurdle gets overcome, Higgins moves up for me. But Lamb seems to be a bit of a variance too. I know you and I are very high on both these guys. I know Tag's very high on T. Higgins, especially a little less so on Lamb from his rankings. So what are your thoughts on these 2 wide receivers and their potential to jump into that upper tier category, even though they're going to get drafted as wide receiver 2s?
Yeah, I think that both of them, to me, are my favorite candidates. I actually put this out on Twitter a couple weeks ago. I said in, what are my years? I'm getting 2019, it was Chris Godwin. 2020, it was Calvin Ridley. Yep. I think this year it is one of CeeDee Lamb or T. Higgins, if not both. I'm really high on both of them. I like Lamb a little bit more. And I agree with you, Joe. I'm a little bit worried about them taking Jamar Chase, which, to Tag's point about the Falcons wide receivers, would be amazing for real life purposes, but they might take away from each other for fantasy purposes. But for CeeDee Lamb, you look at what this guy did last year with Dak Prescott. He was averaging over 17 fantasy points per game, which was right what Amari Cooper was putting up. He was putting up almost 90 yards per game, and that number just cut basically in half when you took Dak Prescott off the field. And let's not forget that was CeeDee Lamb's first 5 games as a pro with no preseason. Like, it was a very weird year for rookies last year, and while a lot of the rookies ascended as the year went on, this guy came in and looked like he could be a wide receiver 1 with Dak. And the fact that they just casted aside Michael Gallup for CeeDee Lamb so early, to me, I really think that CeeDee Lamb is going to be this team's number one wide receiver. I have him ranked ahead of Amari Cooper. They have an out in Amari Cooper's contract after this year. I think that was done on purpose because they know if CeeDee Lamb is what we all expect CeeDee Lamb could be when he was coming out, that he is your true alpha wide receiver there.
It was so good so early, and I had so many shares, and I was so happy because I had all the Dak Prescott along with it, and then it all went south together in October. It was just misery. It's funny looking at these rankings too, Tags. The one guy that you've got that we don't have as a wide receiver too is Odell Beckham Jr. So talk to that for a second, if you will. Why are we continuously going back to this well when it seems like the last few years it's just not as plentiful as it used to be? When do we break away from the name recognition of that guy, and what is it you're seeing that keeps him in that wide receiver 2 territory for you, whereas for Florio, myself, he's a 3?
I mean, I already did take away the name recognition. Like, he's a wide receiver 17, dude. Like, I could make the case for Odell Beckham to be a top 12 wide receiver. The concern is that offense doesn't throw the ball a whole lot. It's the same argument, though, for Michael Thomas. If we move to Taysom Hill-led offense, there's question marks where we've seen both of these guys produce at an elite level. The difference for me here is that Odell Beckham was producing at the beginning of last season. He wasn't a wide receiver 1 like I thought he could be, but it was more like that wide receiver 2 range. He had some ups and downs. He had some wide receiver 1 weeks. He had some weeks outside the top 36, but it all came back to Baker Mayfield, and the fact that Baker Mayfield was learning his third offense in 3 years. Baker Mayfield looked like, I'm gonna say he looked like crap the first half of the season, but he grew as time went on, and people said, is Baker Mayfield better without Odell Beckham? That's the dumbest question I've ever heard. No quarterback is better without Odell Beckham. The question it came down to was he forcing the ball to Odell Beckham? I think that was possible, yeah. And, whenever you get a new toy, you want to play with that toy. It's almost like when I find a new stat, I'm going to gravitate towards that stat. But eventually, things are going to even out. And I think Baker Mayfield grew as a quarterback as the year went on, learned the offense, and basically didn't force anything. And then you saw Rashard Higgins becoming fantasy relevant as a wide receiver 3. You saw Jarvis Landry, because Landry sucked the first 5 weeks too. But Landry turned things up too as the year went on. So I think we saw Mayfield grow. We saw the offense grow. The offensive line is great. This team is built to win. And Odell Beckham, I think he has to realize at some point to say, okay, I'm not the guy that made that one-arm grab that everybody talks about as the best wide receiver in the league anymore. And I think it starts to get personal at some point because, wide receivers have an ego, and they need that. People talk about it all the time. They're selfish, and they kind of need that to be that alpha wide receiver. They have to have that confidence. That's why Julio Jones is so rare. He kind of keeps to himself, but most wide receivers talk. They talk a lot. But Odell Beckham at 17, I mean, if you break down the best wide receivers in the game in terms of from a fantasy aspect, you look at targets and you figure out those guys that are getting 10 targets per game, they're automatic wide receiver 1s. And then you break it down and you start going further down the list. If Odell Beckham is averaging 7-8 targets a game, sign me the F up, because he's going to finish as a wide receiver 2. And we've already seen he has upside for more when he's healthy. The health is always a concern, but I never bet on injuries. I'll use it as a tiebreaker. Odell Beckham is a mid-tier wide receiver 2. You can get him in drafts as a low-end wide receiver 2, sometimes a high-end wide receiver 3. The value is going to be there for Odell Beckham. I just feel like the hate has gone too far in the other direction.
Let me ask you a provocative question, if I may.
Oh, boy.
Any concern that the offense grew without him?
Well, and that's the thing, is I think people are tying it to Beckham leaving the offense, but in reality...
No. Yeah, that's not... I mean, like, in other words, they grew, they took that next step, they developed this rapport, and now you're adding in a piece that wasn't part of it, and maybe that's not necessarily going to fit in with what they're doing. And again, it's a little devil's advocate on my part, but I think it's a question worth asking, because just because you see evolution and progression... and a guy's not there, so much of his timing, so much of his personnel, so much of it is maybe a little bit of unselfishness too, which hasn't been Odell's strong suit in the past. Right. So all of that together, is there any danger of maybe it doesn't work with him? Maybe it's moved on without him?
No, Beckham needs to buy back in. He needs to go back in and say, I understand that this is not, I'm not coming to this team to see 10 to 12 targets per game. That's not my role in this team. Sometimes I'm just going to be a clear out. I'm going to literally pull out the defense and I'm going to force the defense to shift this way. That's my job. My job is to help this team win. He's going to have to buy into that. And again, even if he gets Rashard Higgins targets that Higgins was getting last year, they're not going to throw the ball to Beckham 5 times per game. That's never going to happen because he's too good for that. But again, if he's getting 6-7 targets per game, part of Beckham does have to accept that. Otherwise, the Browns will be shipping him off. this team, you have to buy into what they're doing. Otherwise, we could see a midseason trade because there's other teams that will use Beckham that way because he is that talented. But, again, I have dialed back expectations. I've taken away the name value, but I still recognize the talent on the field.
I recognize the talent. I struggle with where he's at, and I feel like Florio kind of struggles too where he fits with this team, and it feels like the best version of them might be without him. And maybe you're right. Maybe he does get moved on from. But if that's the case, and you're seeing a trade halfway through the season, then drafting Odell certainly could hinder you early on because it still demands some pretty serious draft capital.
Well, I do want to tell people, like, basically sometimes it's like even last year, week 1 of the season, I was a big Odell fan, and I was telling people I would draft him in the 3rd round, no hesitation. And the first week happened against the Ravens. Tough opponent, right? But he got, I think it was like 10 or 11 targets that game, and everybody's like, oh, the Beckham's back to being
yes, I remember,
or whatever. And I went back and I watched that game on NFL Game Pass. I encourage anyone, if you have access to that, to go and watch that game because Odell Beckham was getting open like Odell Beckham typically does. Baker Mayfield was terrible. He was awful in that game. He was missing him left and right. Again, Beckham bounced back. He got better after that game, but again, this is about a wide receiver 2. Wide receiver 2s are not the guys that are going to produce week in, week out because they're getting 9-10 targets per game. These are the guys that are, most of the time they're going to be in that wide receiver 2 tier. They're probably going to get 7 targets per game, maybe 8. Beckham's going to fall in that range.
I'm still going for Lamb. I'm still going for Higgins over them right now. That's just where I am.
I'm curious, Mike. I'm curious about yours. You had CeeDee Lamb over Amari Cooper. I feel like Amari Cooper is continually underrated as an NFL wide receiver. Like, I think people underappreciate him so much. I feel like this is more of an Andre Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins situation where Andre Johnson was a stud with Houston and then DeAndre Hopkins was drafted and people were like, he's going to break out this year. He's going to break out. And he had some good seasons, but he never truly broke out until Andre Johnson was basically done. Amari Cooper's not done. He's still a very young, I think he's 27. So he's not done. He had ankle surgery after the season, which goes to show Amari Cooper was playing through an injury this year, and he still performed at a pretty high level even after Dak went down. He wasn't like a wide receiver 1, but he was a relatively consistent low-end wide receiver 2. So I still have Amari higher. So what brings you to have CeeDee Lamb over Amari this year?
Because I go back to the games where Dak was healthy, and they were basically putting up they were both averaging 17 point something fantasy points per game.
They were stars. Yeah.
And then when it really started to change was when Dak went down, and then Amari Cooper, to his credit, really shook off that the criticism that we always said about Amari Cooper, that he has these really big blow-up games and then completely disappears. Yeah. He didn't do that last year. Like, he did not have those big blow-up games. He was just consistent each game. But I go back to those first 5 games where CeeDee Lamb was a fresh, off the draft rookie with no preseason and putting up near identical numbers as Amari Cooper. I just think CeeDee Lamb in the slot, I love slot receivers for fantasy, and I think some people tend to knock them, but it's like, hey, it's easier to get open. CeeDee Lamb, give him the ball in space and watch what he can do. So for me, I think his upside is actually higher because Amari Cooper last year, I don't want to hold that against him for showing more of a floor, but even before that, he was kind of boom or bust. I think that CeeDee Lamb, for me, it's a testament to how highly I think of CeeDee Lamb. Like, I don't think poorly of Amari Cooper. I just think CeeDee Lamb could be one of the top 10, if not higher, wide receivers this year in fantasy in that offense. And we were really starting to see what he could be last year until Dak Prescott got hurt. And then he also was their top end zone target receiver last year. He had 9 of them, which tied for the team lead. And that was something that the Cowboys continuously spoke up all summer last year, was how good this guy is in the red zone and how dominant he was at practice. And that is something that Amari Cooper has struggled with in his career. Yep. So I think if they get near the goal line, it could be CeeDee Lamb getting a lot of those targets.
I actually agree with you in terms of Lamb being the better red zone presence. I do think that he's better in the end zone. That's one of those things that Amari, he's never been a great contested catch guy. He's always a separation artist. But I love how you brought up the slot thing. I do an article every year. It's how do slot targets affect fantasy football? And so many people underrate him because they're like, oh, they're shorter targets. Of course he's going to catch more, blah, blah. I'm like, no. What are they worth? And I actually break it down. I go through every targets that's thrown, whether it be in the slot or on the perimeter. Slot targets are worth an average of 10.8% more fantasy points than perimeter targets.
And I'll tell you what, I'll throw this onto the heap too. that Cowboys defense did not make any enormous gains year over year, and I don't anticipate in the draft them being able to remake this defense. And you know what? That means there's going to be enough for everybody to eat. And I like Cooper. I have him slightly above Lamb right now, but in terms of value across the board, I think you'll see Cooper, in terms of ECR, be higher. You'll see Cooper go off in drafts, but I prefer the value and the ROI you're getting on Lamb, because for a few picks later or in an auction for a few bucks less, you might be getting the same, if not a better, wide receiver in terms of total fantasy points when all is said and done. And Mike makes a great point there, Tags does, about the targets in terms of points that you're getting when you're talking about slot receivers and how crucial that actually can be and how you shouldn't discount it. I mean, look at Deontay Johnson and how well he did last year and how many fantasy points he put up in full point PPR despite all the drops that he had at times. All right, a quick break here before we get to wide receiver 3. I want to tell everybody about our sponsor, Blue Chew. Look, it's been a hell of a long 2020 last year, and it took its toll on a lot of people, but maybe it took its toll in the bedroom for you, and it's time to snap out of it, okay? BlueChew.com is here for you. It's a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. The tablets combat all forms of erectile dysfunction, and it can help men gain extra confidence when it's time to perform. And Blue Chew is an online prescription service. No doctor's visits, no awkward conversations, no waiting in line at the pharmacy, and it ships right to your door in a discreet package. The process is simple. You just sign up at BlueChew.com, consult one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive a prescription within days. And the best part, it's all done online, so it's quick, it's easy, it's convenient. And if you don't like swallowing pills, guess what? No problem, because it's a chewable. So Blue Chew tablets are made in the USA, and they prepare and ship directly to you, and it's cheaper than a pharmacy. So if you think you can benefit with a little bit of extra performance enhancement, then BlueChew.com is for you. So go over to try Blue Chew for free when you use the code FantasyPros. Again, that's all one word, Fantasy Pros, and at checkout you pay just $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com, promo code Fantasy Pros, first month free and free shipping. Excuse me, just $5 shipping there from Blue Chew. Again, we want to thank Blue Chew for being a sponsor of today's fantasy football podcast at Fantasy Pros. So, Florio, give us your wide receiver 3, and then Tags will go through your group and mine, and then we'll move on to tight end after.
So starting off my wide receiver 3 is Will Fuller, who I loved last year, and I'm still pretty high on this year. I have Odell Beckham Jr. at 26. This one hurts me, but I have Adam Thielen down at 27, Lockett at 28, Sutton at 29, JuJu at 30, DJ Chark Jr. at 31, because I heard a rumor or two that they might be getting a quarterback upgrade. Then I have Tyler Boyd at 32, Jamar Chase at 33. He obviously is going to depend on where he gets drafted. And then Claypool, Robbie Anderson, and Curtis Samuel rounded out.
All right, Tags, take us through your 3s, and we'll group them out.
All right, 25, CeeDee Lamb, 26, Tyler Boyd, 27, Cortland Sutton, 28, Will Fuller, 29, Tyler Lockett, 30, DJ Chark, 31, Chase Claypool, 32, Brandon Ayuk, 33, Jarvis Landry, 34, JuJu Smith-Schuster, 35, Jamar Chase, again, will vary depending on the landing spot, and 36, Deebo Samuel.
All right, there you have it. And I've got on my list here Moore at 25, Jamar Chase all the way at 26. I'm very bullish. I don't care where he lands. I think it's going to be that good in some of the spots that he might be. 27 for me is Cooper Kupp. I am lower on Kupp than you guys are, just a little concerned there. I think some other guys might sort of come in there and perform a little bit better than people might think. Van Jefferson, perhaps. Will Fuller, Cortland Sutton, Odell Beckham. That's the next grouping for me. Then Tyler Lockett at 31, Judy at 32, Shark at 33, Davis at 34, Chase Claypool at 35, Tyler Boyd at 36. And then right around that peripheral, I've got guys like Anderson, Samuel, Chenault. And, looking at these lists here, boys, Florio, I want to start with you here. The Tyler Lockett thing, I just kind of digging into some of his stats this past week. And I'm trying to figure out the love affair that continues to go on with Tyler Lockett. He had 2 3-touchdown games, and then he had 10 games where he was just single-digit half-point PPR fantasy points. And I look at a lot of these guys, and I see so much more upside in a lot of these guys on a weekly basis, not to mention a better floor. And it's not a knock on Tyler Lockett as a wide receiver. I think he's very talented, and he's had some really good fantasy seasons. But when you look at this wide receiver 3 group, are you looking for a guy like Tyler Lockett who is kind of consensus safe? Or are you looking for more one of these guys like Shark to grow, or Will Fuller on a contract year, or something else like that? You get Will Fuller on a 1-year deal, maybe he shows out. What do you look for in wide receiver 3 when you're building a team?
Typically, I strive for upside. I like to build a pretty safe base. I say that as someone who targets running backs very early, very heavily. But I like to get those, first 2 or 3 rounds out of the way. And then I just go for highest upside because, to me, that's kind of how you win the championship, right? Like, I had Tyler Lockett on so many teams last year because for years I have been a Tyler Lockett stan. I was saying that him and Russell Wilson are the most efficient QB wide receiver duo in the NFL, and you would always be able to draft him as like a wide receiver 2 or 3, and I always thought that was great value until last year, and I always joke about this. Tyler Lockett had his career season last year, and we all hated it. Like, he had a career high in fantasy points per game, targets, receptions. He had over 8 touchdowns again. Like, he was just so inconsistent, though. I believe it was something like 37% of his fantasy points came in 2 games last year. So he had that massive game against the Cardinals. He had a couple other big blow-up games. And down the stretch, he was a guy who was costing me in the playoffs because I felt like I can't bench Tyler Lockett, but I would start him and get 7 or 8 fantasy points in a PPR league, and that's just not getting the job done. Plus, I'm a little bit scared off because DK Metcalf is a beast, and he is obviously going to be their alpha target there. And I still think there's room to operate for Lockett if they commit to letting Russ cook, which I can say with zero confidence that they're going to do. It sounds like they want to get back to running the ball more, and that's scary to me.
All right, and DK and Lockett were lockstep in terms of ECR going into last year, and you could see one's a wide receiver 1 now, and one is a distant 3. So, Tags, when you look at your grouping of 3, who do you think is a potential riser? Who do you think is a potential faller or fall out when you're looking at this grouping? Like, who kind of pops to you in yours?
Real quick, I just want to touch base on the whole Tyler Lockett thing. I just added it up for you guys. 3 of his games accounted for 49% of his fantasy points.
That's what I say. I mean, you have 2 3-touchdown games, and again, you look at the rest of it and you see, and it's difficult because you can like a player and respect a player, but at the same time, you have to look at the trend of what's going on, Tags. And when you look at the trend line, you see so much of it happen there. And to a certain extent, it is DK Metcalf. But if Florio's right and they do get to running the ball a little bit more and finding a little bit more balance, that could even hurt Lockett more potentially this year.
Yeah, no, for sure. You have to understand all that stuff. And you have to think about the 2 of the top games that he had. The biggest 2 games he had were against Arizona and Dallas.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Right. Enough said. You don't even have to go past that. We got
it. One thing I do want to make clear, though, and I like that you said it, Joe, is that I think some people, when we say, "Oh, that player is not good," we're comparing. All these players are better than we will ever be and ever were, and all that stuff. Like, they're all great. They are. But what we're doing is we're comparing them to the peers around them. You know what I mean? So it's at their particular job, and their particular job requires a high level of skill. So they're all skilled. As for who can move, Tyler Boyd, if they don't add a big name wide receiver, if they don't take Jamar Chase there in the first round, Tyler Boyd to me is a guy that I'm going to put inside my top 20, and I'm not even going to feel worried about it. Will Fuller is a guy that could move Miami. They've been talking about adding, they have a lot of picks in the top 45. So there's a lot of different names that could all of a sudden be there. He's only on a 1-year contract. He's dealing with a new quarterback. There's definitely some moves that can happen there. And then lastly, I think Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk can move a lot depending on the quarterback situation. If Jimmy Garoppolo is still the starter and if they stick with that, obviously their ceiling's a bit limited when they're both on the field. Because I think a lot of people talk about Brandon Ayuk last year, who was fantastic, by the way, did a lot of that when Deebo Samuel was not on the field. Mm-hmm. When you have him on the field and then all of a sudden you add George Kittle back, who was never on the field, and it's like, wait a minute. Where are the 10 targets per game that Brandon Ayuk was getting? He's not getting them anymore. And all of a sudden you're in that Odell Beckham range of 6-7 targets per game, which is fine for a wide receiver 3. It's fine. But so that all that stuff can happen. Brandin Cooks is a guy who did not make it in my top 36, but I'm kind of hedging here. And I wanted to bring up his name because if Deshaun Watson plays with Houston and is on the field for all 16 games, Brandin Cooks is being tremendously undervalued right now.
I would agree with that.
He's a guy that should be a top 24 wide receiver. But I'm worried that Deshaun Watson's not playing football anytime soon.
I think that's a distinct concern you should have at this point in time. It needs to be. And to your point too, when you're going through Tyler Boyd, and you mentioned him before, Tags, I feel the same way. I said let's wait for certain things to unfold after the draft. Tyler Boyd's another name that I've circled that I'm immediately moving up my board after the draft, as long as they don't take another wide receiver, and I feel like, okay, we can go full steam ahead there. And with wide receiver 3 right now and these great wide receivers coming into the league, there's every year now, it just seems like we're getting more of these guys to pop. And I'm with you, Florio. It's all about the upside here at wide receiver 3, where some people are looking for safety. I think you should be looking for the opposite. You can find some safety later on. There's some other guys in there you feel really good about, but it's those wide receiver 3s that can really kind of make or break some of those leagues. And there's a big variance between all three of us with JuJu Smith-Schuster. Florio, what are your thoughts on him going into the season?
I don't anticipate having any Juju on any of my fantasy teams because I'm a guy who said I like to target upside, and to me, Juju in this offense comes with none. Mm-hmm. Like, I wish he signed with the Chiefs because I think Juju can still ball out. I think Juju can be what he was that year when he had Antonio Brown opposite of him, because everything has kind of gone wrong for Juju since. He had that one year where he was really banged up, Big Ben was out, and it was just a hodgepodge of badness from the Steelers quarterback. But then last year, the offense changed with Big Ben back and his, old crickety elbow that he probably has to spray like WD-40 on before games because they were just not throwing the ball downfield at all. And I said it in the middle of last season. I was like, when did Juju switch to a tight end? Because he was averaging less than 8 air yards per target. He was averaging a career low in yak. He was basically just a tight end for them, like someone that can move the chains and not really come with a lot of upside. And to me, I understand that, yeah, he was a borderline wide receiver 2 last year, and I have him a lot lower than that. But what's the upside there? Because I think Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool both come with more upside than Juju. So I just really don't anticipate me having Juju much at all, if any, next year.
No, do you agree with that sentiment? Because that's
100%, okay. And that's exactly why I have him and Jarvis Landry right next to each other. They are guys that guys that are going to be fine. If you're in a PPR format and you want to draft these guys as wide receiver 3s, you better take some upside with your wide receiver 1 or 2, because there's something to be said for safety in a fantasy lineup. It's almost like a stock portfolio where if you have nothing but blue chip stocks, that's not going to make you a whole bunch of money. If you have nothing but penny stocks, you're never going to make any money. So it's like trying to figure out all that stuff, having good balance. So it just depends on the rest of your roster, but that's why I have these guys as back-end wide receiver 3s, because I would rather take a shot on someone like Chase Claypool because he has the potential to be a league winner, whereas JuJu Smith-Schuster's not going to be that guy. I do think, by the way, though, that in the beginning of the year, we saw Juju struggle a little bit, and then all of a sudden, Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool started making a name for themselves, and I was like, screw Juju, we're not worried about him. And then he actually started to perform a little bit better as the year went on. So I think Juju, a wide receiver 3, I'm fine with it, especially in a PPR format.
All right, fair enough. You mentioned Deebo before too. I love Deebo. Big fan of his going into this last year and the year before as a rookie as well. It's the every year being hurt where eventually it just starts to really grate on you, and it really starts to make you question whether or not it's ever going to happen. And Ayuk having the run that he did, I understand where you're coming from, which is, hey, when you add everything back, what does Ayuk look like? But I mean, at this point, how confident are you when you add Deebo back tags that Deebo can stay on the field?
Well, to be fair, and fortunately, all of our takes are on podcasts, and you can come and yell at me about my bad takes. But one of the good takes I had last year. That's the best thing to do.
I encourage everyone to do that to tags. Just go yell at him. Just record stuff and yell at him on Twitter.
I will never live down AJ Green, by the way. But no, in reality, though, Deebo Samuel is someone I said do not draft last year. Do not. And I'm going to be that way with players that have foot injuries. If they have a foot surgery the year of, like, so if there was Julio Jones, Calvin, if someone had foot surgery, let's say in April, and they were like, oh, they're going to be fine for the season. Foot surgery, I don't mess with. Like, for wide receivers, it's not good. However, I haven't done an article on it, and I really should, but basically I did my own study and I looked at that, and then the following year it could be fine. So Deebo Samuel is a guy that he's a big part of that offense, and they're going to use him in a lot of creative ways. Brandin Ayuk is the one who's going to suffer the most, because I think Deebo Samuel was never a guy that people were expecting to be a top 20 wide receiver. It was more like he's fantasy relevant. You can get some points out of him. He's consistent in a way that a slot receiver is, even though he's not necessarily a slot receiver. He's just used all over the formation. They manufacture touches for him, so he's going to score fantasy points. Brandin Ayuk is the guy that's going to require a little bit more targets because he's basically a perimeter wide receiver. They'll give him a couple handoffs here and there, but in the end, I think Ayuk is the one who's going to suffer a little bit more with Deebo back in the lineup. George Kittle's going to be Kittle and all that, but it's going to be a good offense. I'm really, really curious. I've been talking with guys all day about it, trying to figure out what the 49ers are doing at 3 and getting into arguments on Twitter. But ultimately, I think I've landed that my final mock draft, I'm pretty sure Trey Lance is going to be in there at 3.
I love that you're saying that because Yates and I have been kind of like pounding you to do that for, I feel like 2 weeks now. Yeah. So it's good that we're having such a negative influence on you this early on in the season. It makes me
we were in sync. We were in sync. As long as it wasn't Mac Jones, they didn't screw it up.
That we all agreed on. But I mean, I went back and watched that Trey Lance pro day a second time, and I don't know. I came away just watching it going, you got to take the shot here with this kid. You just got to do it, in my opinion. But again, we'll see how it all shakes out this week. And again, you could watch that live with us on our YouTube stream. You like that? See what I did there? Bringing it all back together. All right, let's talk a little tight end here. Florio, kick us off with your tight end ones.
So my tight end one is obvious. The most obvious ranking in all of fantasy football is Travis Kelce is the tight end one, in my opinion.
Let's just stop there. Okay, yep, it's it. That's it. I mean, but who's not going to have him as one, Florio? Right at the end of the day, like who's the hot take moron that doesn't put him in?
Oh boy,
it's like 5 or 6, maybe even 7. I forget the exact stat, but it's something like 5 or 6 years in a row he has been the top scoring fantasy tight end. Like, let's just take him number 1. I'm someone who like 5 or 6 overall would be comfortable taking Travis, maybe a little bit later, like 7 or 8. But I'm fine taking Travis Kelce in the middle of the first round. I actually have Darren Waller at 2, George Kittle at 3, Mark Andrews 4, TJ Hockenson 5, Kyle Pitts, the rookie, 6,
buddy.
Dallas Goedert 7, Thomas 8, Gesicki 9, Irv Smith Jr., who I'm really high on. I have him at 10, Noah Fant at 11, and Evan Ingram at 12.
Now, I, too, am high on Irv Smith Jr. I've got him at 11. I'll go through mine because Tags is going to laugh at both of us because we both like Kyle Pitts. Now, you like him even more than I do, but so I'll let Tags just kind of yell at you about it. Kelce 1 for me and Waller. They're kind of their own tier for me. Kittle, I love Kittle. He's a wrestling guy. I love everything about him. I just want him to stay on the field more and catch more touchdowns, and so far that's been a bad combination for him. Andrews at 4, Hockenson at 5 for me, Dallas Goedert at 6, Pitts at 7. I really do believe this can be a transcendent tight end. I think he can buck a lot of the trends. And when you start to look, once you get past that first 6 for me, that's where I start to struggle with shots. Now, Jonnu Smith, I think, is going to be better than people think. I don't think that whole Hunter Henry thing is going to be nearly the negative that some other people are projecting it to be. We'll see how it all shakes out. Logan Thomas is at 9 for me, then Tonyan at 10, Irv Smith at 11, and Fant at 12. So, Tags, who's your grouping here?
All right, so my top 2, Kelce and Kittle. I mean, those are the dudes. And but Kittle is, I mean, Kittle just hasn't scored the touchdowns, right? He hasn't had that opportunity. Does that change? Again, we're hinging a lot on the quarterback situation here and who they draft. If it's Mac Jones, it's actually probably beneficial for Kittle because there's not going to be as many rushing touchdowns. Probably going to be a little bit more passing because they feel if they trade up for Mac Jones, they obviously think that he's the next Tom Brady.
Well, if they do you think that Garoppolo goes in the draft too? Like, do you think he goes via trade somewhere else? Or
if it's Mac Jones, they might as well trade Garoppolo. Like, you have the same guy on the roster. I don't know why.
The pointing Spider-Man gif.
Yeah, that's basically how it goes. So those are my top 2. Kittle is the digit stud. If he stays healthy, he's obviously going to be there. Darren Waller 3, Mark Andrews 4, TJ Hockenson 5, Dallas Goedert 6, Noah Fant 7, Robert Tonyan 8, Hayden Hurst 9, Mike Gesicki 10, Jonnu Smith 11, and Logan Thomas 12. There's so much that could hint like. This is the position that I am so uncomfortable talking about right now.
Good, let's talk about it a lot then.
Yeah, well, yeah, obviously. No, but the reason I am is because targets. That's all I chase at tight end. So you guys have talked about Kyle Pitts. So when we're talking about the NFL draft and what team he might go to, we think about teams like the Atlanta Falcons, right? That's the first team that I think that we would talk about with Kyle Pitts, and they have Hayden Hurst in the roster, who's an NFL veteran, obviously. They traded for him. They actually traded a second-round pick for him, so they obviously do value him. They have Julio Jones. They have Calvin Ridley. They now have Arthur Smith, who, by the way, is not going to have Matt Ryan drop back 650 times like Dirk Cutter did. So the offense is changing. There's a lot changing there where Kyle Pitts would be eased in. Would it be a problem for opposing defenses? Yeah, but he's not going to walk into 100 targets. It's not happening. The next team that you look at would be the Bengals. Okay, maybe I can see it because there's a lot of passing going on there. The defense is being rebuilt. 6, the Dolphins. The Dolphins have Mike Gesicki, who, again, a veteran presence who's coming on with Tua Tagovailoa, developed a relationship as the year went on. rookie tight ends just don't really produce. Like
they
if we look through the history, even the greatest tight ends, like it takes some time. Even Travis Kelce, I've seen interviews with him saying the NFL is a different animal. He's like, I walked in, thought I was going to produce, and he's like, and I didn't. Like I had to learn a lot about the position before I was going to be on it all the time. And then you've seen him take off. Kyle Pitts can be that player. Like he reminds me a lot of Vernon Davis, by the way,
right,
who had a crappy start to his career that people called a bust, and then all of a sudden he developed in like. Vernon Davis was really freaking good. He was really good. Crazy athlete. That's who Kyle Pitts actually reminds me of. So I'm not willing to do that yet, but really after the NFL draft, I'm going to be able to go through the depth charts. I'm able to create my first set of projections for the year, and then I'm going to have a much better feel as to which tight ends are going to have a path to, 90 to 100 targets. That's basically what I'm looking for. So that's why I can't put him there now.
All right, Hockenson must be somebody you must be going after then, because if you like targets, because that certainly seems to be a possibility, distinctly, that Jared Goff doesn't have many options, and Hockenson might be one of them. So maybe one of the better values on the board. You have him at 5, I've got him at 5, and Florio has him at 5. So honestly, all three of us clearly agree when you're looking for targets, that's a good spot. We'll see if Goddard can do that as well, because most of us have him around 6. I want to talk to you, Florio, about Irv Smith, because you mentioned you're high on him. He's in your top 10. I have him at 11. So what is it you're seeing out of Irv Smith, and does it have something to do with also where Thielen's starting to drop off in your mind a little bit too? Maybe sort of like a meeting of the minds here, where you're moving one guy up and one guy down a little bit overall in terms of ranking.
Yeah, Irv Smith is someone that, since they drafted him, like, I thought that he had the talent to be a tight end 1, and for the last, 2 years now, I've been like, just set Kyle Rudolph free, let him go. Kyle Rudolph never lived up to expectations, and they were just, for the 2 years that Irv Smith has been there, they've been splitting the passing down duties. Like, they run basically the same number of routes per game. They see basically the same number of targets per game. But we saw a glimpse at the end of last season what life could be like without Kyle Rudolph there, when Irv Smith is getting 100% of the tight end passing game duty. And he was awesome last year without Kyle Rudolph. You look at what he did. He was averaging 13 fantasy points per game without Kyle Rudolph, and that might not sound like a whole lot, but for a tight end, that's pretty good. And I do agree too. I think Adam Thielen is on a downward trajectory.
Yeah.
Like last year, he caught 14 touchdowns, and that saved his season and made him a wide receiver 1. Luckily for me, because I ranked him as a wide receiver 1, but his yards were down dramatically, and I think he's 33 years old now, so I could see him starting to decline while Irv Smith starts to rise. But what I also love about Irv Smith is that this offense they have tunnel vision, right? Like, they're going to lock in on their top targets. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and I think Irv Smith is going to be that clear third target for Kirk Cousins. So can he see 6 targets a game? I think so, and there's not a whole lot of tight ends that you could say that about. That's why for me at this position, it's get one of the big 3, or wait until the double-digit rounds and get an Irv Smith.
Okay, now you are not high on Tonyan either. Tags and I both have him in our top 12. You don't. Explain yourself.
So Tonyan last year averaged 3.7 targets per game. That ranked 29th amongst tight ends, but he had 11 touchdowns, which was the most, tied with Travis Kelce.
Right.
I do not see that happening again. Robert Tonyan is a good red zone target, but is he if that number drops down to 7 touchdowns, he is going to really be hurting, especially since he had fewer than 5 targets in 14 of his 16 games last year. And in the games without a touchdown, he was averaging fewer than 5 fantasy points per game. So very inconsistent. And to me, I think he's going to suffer some touchdown regression, especially because I think the Packers are finally going to address the wide receiver position. And I expect them to do so early in the draft next week. But if they don't, and if they have a draft like last year, then I will raise Tonyan. But for me right now, it just seems like last year was way too touchdown dependent.
Tags, be our Robert Tonyan champion. Go do it, Tags.
I mean, he plays with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he's someone that actually
who is also going to have touchdown regression.
For sure, 100%.
Sure, absolutely, without a doubt.
But he's always on top of it. He's going to throw a touchdown. Regression for Aaron Rodgers is like throwing a touchdown in 6% of his passes. That's kind of ridiculous how good he is, and people just don't appreciate him. But anyway, stop aging people, Florio. You said Julio Jones. Hold on a second. He said Julio Jones is 33 earlier, and he said Adam Thielen was 33. Julio's 32. Thielen will be 31 in August. So, I got to stand up for us old guys. You guys are young. No. In reality, Tonyan comes down to scoring opportunities and not feeling particularly confident about the guys behind him. Like Hayden Hurst, we have our question marks there. I didn't think that. I felt like there would be a learning curve with Atlanta where it's like Matt Ryan. You saw Austin Hooper take some time to develop some chemistry with Matt Ryan and become like that top 10 tight end that he played in his last year there. So I figured Hayden Hurst might have a learning curve, but now we're talking about adding another tight end. So I'm hedging. Mike Gesicki. I mean, do we really want to draft Mike Gesicki? Do we want to tie ourselves to Tua Tagovailoa? And especially considering they're going to add other options, whether it be a Jamar Chase, they already added Will Fuller, so it's going to be tougher for him. Jonnu Smith, love the player, absolutely love the player, and I would have him over Tonyan if they didn't.
I'm going to get I got you to Trey Lance tags.
Angry.
By the time we get to July 4th, I'm going to get you to Jonnu Smith. I'm going to get you there. Just get on board, baby. I got you. We're going to get there. Hold my hand. It's going to be safe. Don't worry.
I kid you not. I would have him at number 8 tight end if they
Which is funny. I think that's where I have him.
Hunter frickin' Henry.
Stop letting Hunter Henry dictate to you what you see in front of your face. Trust your instincts. Use the forest tags. You see what Jonnu Smith. I understand that. Well, they paid Jonnu Smith a lot of money too.
I know.
They had a lot of money to spend. They overpaid for everything. They also paid Kendrick Bourne. Okay, they overpaid a lot of guys.
Yeah,
don't let the money they spend. Right. And I like Kendrick Bourne. He's had some moments here with the 49ers over the last year or two. But the point is this. The point is, as soon as free agency happened, the first guy off the board practically was Jonnu Smith, right? Like they went right after him. That should tell you everything. I understand that it's there and you're thinking about it. And as an analyst, you're right to have reservations, but don't let that steer you away from what could be here with Jonnu Smith and the Patriots, because they do have a plan for him. And I'm telling you right now, he's going to, if you're looking for targets, that's what you're looking for, I think you're going to get a fair amount of them, because there's not a whole lot of choices there. And let's not forget, Cam Newton at his best was always Cam Newton and Greg Olsen. And I think that's what you want to do again. You want to give him a tight end who's athletic, that could do a lot of things you could trust out there. And Jonnu Smith, look, I know Yates was a big fan last year, so was I. I know you are too. Let's just get there. Let's stop letting Hunter Henry rule our lives. Florio, I want to thank you so much for spending this glorious hour with us talking fantasy football here. I know you got the draft coming up. You're doing so many things. You can follow him over on Twitter at Michael F. Florio. And, of course, you can see him on NFL Network and NFL Fantasy. Florio, what else you got going on right now?
A lot of NFL draft stuff. I'm really excited for the draft, but I'm really excited for the period after the draft, too, because, like Tags, that's when I really jump in and formulate my rankings and projections, because right now we're still kind of guessing. We still have information that we need to have. And then also doing some baseball work and for rotoballer.com, and you could hear me and Scott the King Engel, a friend of everyone here, on Sirius XM on Saturday mornings and Sunday evenings.
Good stuff there. And check out Florio's wide receiver profiles in the upcoming 2021 Black Book on Amazon June 1st. Can't wait. So excited for you to be a part of it this year with me, my friend. Tags, how about you? I know we've got our big mock draft 2 rounds coming up on Monday on the 26th, and we know we've got our big time live draft coverage right here on Fantasy Pros. Again, subscribe if you haven't, please. Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Click the notifications button. That way you know, and we're going to be right there with you. That perfect second screen experience. Tags, I know you got a million things going on, and you're writing a bunch of stuff too. What's happening on the in the salt mines for you this week?
I'm trying to compile every possible bit of information I can for my final mock draft. That'll be up next Tuesday. I'll put out my final big board on Monday. So that's coming up. Be there for the live stream. Seriously, it's the most fun thing because it's all like it's off the cuff. I mean, you can't prepare for that stuff. It's just like you're going to talk about football and have a good time. Like literally, you're going to be hanging out with 3 guys basically at the bar just talking football, and it's going to be a good time. Hopefully, we make some sense and Joe doesn't drink too much. But I'm really excited that we get to see Roger Goodell. We found out that he gets to bro hug because he had a vaccine. So apparently
awesome.
he's going to get to bro hug everybody. So I'm looking forward to that.
That makes it all worth it. I was wondering last year too if the draft happens and no one's around there in person, does Roger Goodell still get booed?
He's just like,
and the answer was yes, it still happened. I want to remind everybody too, and our sponsor of the show, ipvanish.com/pros. Again, claim your 65% off savings there at ipvanish.com/pros. They have plans starting at $349 or $31.49 per year. And again, it's going to protect you and all of your internet, and also our friends at Blue Chew as well. They've got great stuff over there, Blue Chew. And again, you get a free month when you use the code FantasyPros, all one word, FantasyPros at checkout, and you pay just $5 for shipping thanks to BlueChew.com. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Tags and Florio, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos, And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at FantasyPros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.